Yeah, like as the affirmative?
No, like when you're answering questions.
Oh yeah. Well, of course it's about control, right? So I'm not saying obfuscate anything, but if the affirmative is trying to mischaracterize your link or to characterize a link in a way that is, and that's what the affirmative tries to do, right? They stand up and they're like, so your link says this, which is something that they can obviously get out of. Then you're like, no, that's not what it says. Don't be over eager to explain it. Don't be like, no, what my link says is this. Just be like, no, you're mischaracterizing it. No, that's not what I said. No, the Gilligan evidence indicates something else, right? And then if they ask you for clarification, then clarify it exactly the way it was in the 1 in C. They want you to pare your link down. They want you to really make your argument less offensive than it is because they want it to be easier to get out of. But don't give them that during prep. And it's the same with interpretations on T. For some reason, people always get caught up in like, so what is topical? What isn't topical? I'm not a big fan of the response that you don't have to provide synergistic models. Well, it's not my job to give you a synergistic model. Be ready with a synergistic model of your T interpretation of a couple of things that would be topical. That makes you look a lot more reasonable, makes your interpretation look a lot more reasonable. But I don't know. It's like they're going to try and pare down everything. Your links, your internals, your T interpretations, etc. But don't let them, right? Don't become more specific just because he or she is being maybe assertive during prep. Don't let them scare you into a corner so that they can paint around you. Go ahead.
You said that we should at least argue for anti-text if nothing else on case. So what's a good way to cross-ex them so they, they get stuck with that argument at least for?
Okay. Yeah. It's I mean, it depends upon the plan text. Some plan texts are incredibly clear. So it's a little bit more difficult on those. But like with enforcement, like you could ask about the mechanism by which plan happens, right? Like, does this, who's in charge of implementing plan? Okay, and how do they do that? Okay, can you explain the process or the criteria upon which they make that decision? Like, one of the big things on the environmental topic was compliance, right? The EPA, there's lots of EPA bad lit. And so we would always try and link people into the EPA bad lit by getting them to concede in cross-ex that plan has to be implemented at some point by the EPA. And the EPA, one of the biggest problems with them was that they never had clear criteria upon which to measure compliance. It was always a political process. And so that's one of the things you might want to ask about. Especially on this topic with constructive engagement. If somebody's doing quid pro quo, then you might want to ask, so how do we know when Cuba has really complied with the mandates and plan? Who makes that decision? Who makes the determination that Cuba has given enough to requisite this carrot, or this offer that you're making them? So that's the State Department? You mean Bush's State Department? All those neocons who hate Cuba are going to be making the decision of whether or not to give them an OTEC ship or whatever, right? And at least then you can go to plan and say, look, without a spelled out compliance mechanism, it's very unlikely that the Bush State Department is ever going to see Cuba as in compliance. And it's going to take them at least 15 seconds to answer that argument. Does that make sense? You see how you can do that? Any other questions? All right.
So this is the bailing scenario. You're in your rebuttals. There are 3 turn disads that you're running, 1 reverse T, and case press. The T you ran was really bad in the first place, and one of the disads was a railroad's disad or something. Crappy impact, bad links, all that jazz. You have to start bailing. We're going to go through how it is this turns into a winning scenario for you. The first is in the conception. See this? It's the 0 NC. A big problem people have is in their conception of what your rebuttal is. Most people will treat this speech as a 2 NC. Think about everything that the 1 AC is afforded. They have a plan that's established, cards that they pull from. Everything is easy for them. It's extension, apply, extension, apply. If you're in your 1 NR and you're reading new cards, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. This is the status quo. It's been established for you. You can pull from there. So all you have to do in your NC, establish your strategy, and then here, you're pulling your extensions. No trouble. Now, what people will do in their 1 ARs is that they're going to skim for drops, will be their first step. They'll try and do extensions for what parts of case were dropped. There's no reason why you shouldn't do the same thing in the 1 NR. You're going to check your D rules. That's the second step. Somewhere in here, when you laid out your original strat, you've laid some D rules. You may have put them on the DAs, you may have hidden them on case, you may have had a wasted one on T. Look what goes through. It's the hanging weight. And then the last is, you want to check for their D rules. This one's obvious. Here they're trying to steal yours. And here, just worry about whether they win case. As soon as you do all that, that lays out your strategy. It's all developed for you. You know where the weight is in the round. You know where you have to go. Your hand is going to be forced. So what you do is you have to think like a judge. The judge has to vote either according to weight or according to procedural rules of some sort. The way to get there is by establishing a framework of the round that monopolizes on the strategy of the 2 AR instead of a strategy that a constructive might make. Think about how the 2 AR operates. It's a very psychologically advantageous speech for them. A judge knows that they only have 3 minutes to respond, and most 2 ARs will start talking in terms of stories. They won't be precise with their pools. They won't be precise with their card references. Suddenly, they'll pull a general argument, and then they'll make the relevant extensions. You should be doing the same. When you do that, it's an efficient way of establishing winning arguments. You can pull through brick walls. And that's exactly how you win back your turn disheads. Here's how it works. A good point will always beat a blip, right? So when you take Cress's strategy in the 1 NC, and you lay out good cards, you lay out your solid arguments, all you have to do